I'm Rick Harrison, and this is my pawn shop.
Pawn shop owners, I want to bring in Rick Harrison, who you may recognize from the TV series Pawn Stars. He's also the owner of the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in Las Vegas.
Remember Rick Harrison from Pawn Stars? For more than a decade, he was the calm, confident face of one of television's biggest reality shows. Sitting behind the counter of the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, Rick looked like a man who had everything figured out. Fame, financial success, and a family business that became a worldwide brand, it all seemed uncheckable. To viewers, Rick was the ultimate deal maker. He knew history, understood value, and never appeared rattled. Every episode reinforced the idea that he was always one step ahead. But what fans didn't see were the cracks forming behind the scenes, quiet pressures that slowly built up. For away from the cameras and scripted negotiations. In recent years, Rick Harrison's life has taken a dramatic turn. A series of personal losses, business challenges, and unexpected changes have forced him to confront realities no amount of experience could prepare him for. The empire he worked decades to build didn't collapse overnight, but piece by piece things began slipping out of his control. Now, fans who once saw Rick as untouchable are shocked by how much has changed. The man who appeared to have everything is facing a reality that feels almost unrecognizable. And while headlines oversimplify the story, the truth is far deeper and far more human than most people realize. This is not just about losing money or stepping out of the spotlight. It's about what happens when success can't protect you from life itself. For a long time, the cameras made Rick Harrison's life look stable, predictable, and secure. Week after week, viewers watched him calmly evaluate rare items, negotiate tough deals, and walk away on top. What the audience didn't see was how much of that stability depended on momentum on the show running. The brand staying strong and life cooperating in ways no one can control forever. As the years passed, the spotlight that once protected Rick slowly began to fade. Reality television is unforgiving, and fame tied to a single format can be fragile. Changes in audience interest, shifts in the media landscape, and behind-the-scenes pressures started to chip away at the world Rick had grown used to. The pawn shop was still there, but the unstoppable force behind it wasn't as certain as it once was. At the same time, Rick faced personal challenges that couldn't be negotiated away like items across a counter. Family tensions, emotional strain, and deeply personal losses began to weigh on him. These were struggles no episode could edit out, and no business experience could fully prepare him for. Success had given him resources, but it couldn't shield him from grief or internal conflict. The balance Rick had maintained for years started to shift. Running a business while being a public figure demands constant attention, and the pressure to live up to an image can quietly erode peace of mind. Decisions became heavier. Responsibilities felt more isolating. What once felt like control slowly turned into endurance. Fans noticed changes before they understood them. Rick appeared more reserved, less visible, and increasingly distant from the version of himself audiences remembered. Some assumed it was simply age or fatigue, but the reality was more complex. When the structure that defines your identity begins to change, it forces uncomfortable reflection. The show had provided rhythm and purpose for years. Without that constant cycle, Rick had to confront a life less scripted and far more uncertain. The business world he knew so well suddenly felt unstable, shaped by factors beyond negotiation skills or experience. Markets change. Public attention moves on. And when it does, it takes more than confidence to adapt. What makes this moment so striking is that Rick didn't lose everything in one dramatic event. It happened gradually. Opportunity narrowed. Familiar patterns disappeared. The certainty he once relied on slowly slipped away. For someone whose reputation was built on control and calculation, this loss of predictability was deeply unsettling. Yet within this unraveling lies a human truth. Rick Harrison's story reveals how fragile public success can be, especially when it's tied to visibility. When that visibility fades, what remains is the individual without applause, without edits, and without guarantees. This phase of his life isn't defined by defeat, but by confrontation. Confrontation with change, with loss, and with the reality that even the most seasoned dealmakers can't negotiate with time. And that realization marked the beginning of far more difficult than anything Rick faced on camera. What most viewers never realized is that the hardest Losses Rick Harrison faced had nothing to do with business deals or television contracts. While the show focused on rare artifacts and clever negotiations, Rick was quietly dealing with realities that couldn't be solved with experience or logic. These were losses that unfolded away from cameras, without scripts, and without an audience to distract from the weight of it all. Fame has a way of magnifying success while hiding pain. For Rick, public recognition often meant people assumed his life was permanently secure. But behind closed doors, the pressures of maintaining a public image while managing personal responsibilities began to take their toll. Expectations came from all directions: fans, business partners, and even family, and meeting them became increasingly exhausting. One of the most difficult aspects was how personal challenges collided with professional ones. When life becomes unstable, even well-run businesses feel heavier to manage. Decisions that once came easily required more emotional energy. Confidence didn't disappear, but it was tested in ways the show never captured. Rick also had to face a harsh truth many public figures encounter: attention doesn't last forever. As the cultural landscape shifted, so did the level of public focus. That change can feel like loss, even when success remains. For someone whose identity was intertwined with visibility and authority, adjusting to a quieter presence was not easy. What made this period especially isolating was the lack of understanding from the outside. To fans, Rick still seemed wealthy and established. From the inside, however, the sense of control he once had was slipping. The familiar rhythm of filming, promotion, and public engagement no longer anchored his daily life. Without that structure, everything felt less predictable, though there was also the emotional impact of reflection. When momentum slows, people are forced to look back. Rick began reassessing decisions, relationships, and priorities that had been overshadowed by years of nonstop work. This kind of reflection can be uncomfortable, especially when success once made those questions feel unnecessary. Another challenge was the responsibility of legacy. The pawn shop wasn't just a business, it was a family symbol, a place tied to history and identity. Protecting that legacy while navigating change added another layer of pressure. Every choice felt heavier because it carried emotional weight, not just financial consequences. What fans interpret as losing everything isn't always about material loss. Sometimes it's the loss of certainty, routine, and the version of life you thought would last forever. Rick Harrison's journey reflects that reality. When the framework that supports your identity shifts, it can feel like the ground disappears beneath you. Yet within this struggle, there is resilience. Rick didn't collapse or disappear. He adapted even when adaptation meant letting go of old expectations. The losses he faced forced him to redefine success outside of television fame and constant recognition. This quieter phase of his life reveals something deeply human. Even those who seem most prepared can be undone by change. And even those who appear to have everything can feel like they've lost it when the life they knew no longer exists. The story of Rick Harrison's losses isn't dramatic in the way reality TV thrives on. There were no sudden betrayals or one shocking event that brought everything down. Instead, it was a gradual erosion, a series of small but powerful shifts that quietly accumulated over time. This is what made the reality so hard to accept, both for Rick and for the fans who followed his every move. At the heart of it was change in circumstances beyond his control. Markets shifted. Interests evolved, and even the novelty that once drew viewers to Pawn Stars slowly diminished. For a business built on attention and curiosity, these shifts were profound. They tested not only Rick's business acumen but his ability to maintain confidence in the face of uncertainty. Simultaneously, personal struggles compounded the challenges. Family dynamics, health concerns, and emotional fatigue, all common in private lives, added weight to his public persona. Rick's identity, once firmly tied to sharp negotiation and visible success, now faced pressures that could not be countered by knowledge or experience alone. As the reality settled in, Rick had to confront the fact that control has limits. The measures that once guaranteed predictable outcomes, strategy, negotiation, foresight, were no longer sufficient. The world continued, indifferent to fame or reputation. And Rick's empire, as familiar as it had once seemed, was no longer immune to forces outside his influence. What makes this period especially poignant is that it illuminates a universal truth. Even the most skilled, most prepared individuals cannot protect themselves from life's unpredictability. For someone whose persona was built on calm certainty, facing this loss was deeply humbling. It required acceptance, reflection, and resilience. Rick's story also highlights the illusion of permanence that often accompanies success. On television, the empire seems unshakable, the deal's flawless, and the future guaranteed. Off-camera, however, reality operates differently. Fame can amplify influence, but it does not eliminate vulnerability. And even those who appear untouchable must navigate change with caution and care. Through it all, Rick remained committed to the principles that had brought him success in the first place: hard work, integrity, and measured decision-making. Though the empire he built was no longer the same, these values became his anchor, providing clarity and stability in turbulent times. In the end, the losses he faced were more than financial. They were structural, emotional, and existential. They forced Rick Harrison to redefine what mattered most, to reconsider his identity beyond the counter, beyond the show, and beyond the fame. And it is in that redefinition, not in the empire itself, that Rick's true story emerges. Today, Rick Harrison's life looks very different from the one fans remember. The cameras no longer follow him through the pawn shop, and the constant spotlight of reality TV has dimmed. The empire he once appeared to command with ease has transformed into a quieter, more uncertain existence. Yet within this change lies a story about resilience, identity, and the human side of fame that few ever witness. For Rick, losing everything wasn't about failure, it was about confrontation. He had to face the reality that wealth, popularity, and status cannot shield anyone from the unpredictability of life. The lessons he learned on television about negotiation and value suddenly had to be applied in ways that mattered far more personally than any rare artifact or collectible. This period of his life also revealed the complexity behind public perception. Fans had seen only the highlights, the sharp deals, the confident smiles, the entertainment. What they didn't see was the constant effort required to maintain stability, the stress that comes from being both a business owner and a public figure, and the emotional toll of balancing personal life with public expectations. Yet Rick's story is far from tragic. While the world may define success by wealth and visibility, he has discovered that true resilience comes from adaptability. He has had to rethink priorities, focus on what genuinely matters, and find fulfillment beyond television ratings or social media attention. This reinvention has been challenging, but it has also been empowering. The lessons from Rick Harrison's journey extend beyond Hollywood. They remind us that even those who seem invincible are subject to life's uncertainties. They show that fame and fortune are temporary, but values, integrity, and the ability to adapt are lasting. And they highlight a simple truth: losing what you thought defined you can lead to discovering what really does. For fans, the transformation may feel jarring, but it is also humanizing. The man behind Pawn Stars is not just a television personality. He is someone who faced loss, navigated change, and continues to move forward with purpose. In stepping away from the empire he built, Rick has redefined success not by the size of his fortune, but by the strength of his character. Ultimately, Rick Harrison's story is about more than a TV show or a business. It is a reminder that life is unpredictable, that identities built on public perception are fragile, and that the courage to endure change is a measure of true strength. Though he may have lost everything in material terms, what remains is a deeper understanding of life, priorities, and what it means to be resilient in a world that never stops moving.